Yep, I'm in another hotel room, but this one actually has an interesting background over the bed. They have painting of a little bit of the mountains around Munich, Germany, which is where I am, and kind of makes it a little different. I think I look in this light more red than brown, coffee brown, my usual shade, but the best I can do. So I wanted while my impressions are still fresh, to talk about a visit I made today to a museum in Munich, Germany, which I would not have discovered if I hadn't decided to take a walking tour, self-guided walking tour of locations associated with the history of the Third Reich in Munich. And the first building I went to was the Führer's headquarters in Munich, the building that I guess the Nazi Party occupied as their bastion in Munich, and which was later taken over by the army after the war and after the US military entered Munich. Anyway, next door to this building, there was a museum, which I had not, otherwise heard of, which is the Munich, let me get it right, the Munich Documentation Center for the History of National Socialism. And it's free entry. It's a brand new, I don't know how brand new it is, but it's a new purposely built building. And I went in there and I was kind of blown away by the exhibits. So the point, or the museum documentation, focuses on trying to answer the question of why it was that Munich was the germination point for the Nazi movement. Why did it happen in Munich and not another German city? And for the most part, I think residents of Munich, just aren't too proud about that right now. So I went in, and as I went through the exhibits, there was, some really interesting points that seem to me parallel to our history today. And I'm not going to say anything more about that. I'm not going to be rhetorical or bang the points home. I'll let you all make your own connections. But it was really quite interesting about what the people of Munich, the Germans themselves, think contributed to the rise of Nazi socialism in Munich, particularly, and no other German city. So they talk about how right after the defeat in World War I, there was actually for a few days, successful communist Soviet revolution in Munich along the lines of the Russian Revolution in Russia. And so some red, highly radicalized individuals seemed to take over at least the governing the streets of Munich until the German army arrived. It did not last very long, but that memory appeared to have been quite scarring for the city. I think as a result, the German government kind of concentrated on trying to understand what was going on in the workers' parties in Munich and infiltrated them. Famously, one of the people that they used to infiltrate these movements was Adolf Hitler. And as I understand my history of this period, Adolf Hitler soon transitioned from being a government informal agent provocateur to a leader of the National Socialist Party. Now, one of the things that happened then in 1923 was that the fledgling Hitler-led National Socialist Party attempted a putsch in Munich. I think, I don't know, is putsch a word that people use to describe a comical coup that doesn't work? It wasn't that comical because I believe upwards of 20 people were killed in this attempt by Hitler and the National Socialist Party to overturn what they perceived to be too liberal a party government in Munich in favor of the National Socialists. But that's what happened. And what the museum reveals is that the push was rather quickly squashed. And what the museum reveals is that the trial of Adolf Hitler and the several other people who were his followers became a lightning rod for this conservative sentiment in Bavaria. And the trial also became notorious because the presiding judge was conservative, sympathetic to the views and aspirations of the defendants, and so gave them all very light sentences compared to the crimes that they had committed. So, for example, Hitler was sentenced to 5 years in prison and ended up serving not even a full year. I think he went into prison in the spring and was released before Christmas. So that was interesting about the significance of that push and focusing energy on that right-wing sentiment and on the fact that the trial was perceived in Munich as having just been a slap on the wrist, at least the penalties were. And then the third thing, which I thought was really interesting about the development of the Nazi Party in Munich, was that Munich became this conservative holdout against a modernism that was occurring in the rest of Germany. So these are the 1920s. And, because of World War I, and now we know, having lived through our own pandemic, probably also because of the Spanish flu, that people kind of developed a more live for life's sake, hedonistic attitude in the 1920s. And in Germany, this expressed itself in a lot of exploration of the edges and the boundaries of art, of theater, of painting, of social mores. And so for the conservative Bavarians in Munich, the goings-on in Berlin and Hamburg and the other German cities were absolutely scandalous. And Munich prided itself, and Bavaria in general, held itself out as the bastion for conservative, truly German attitudes toward the arts. In fact, I used to think that when Hitler came to power, that he banned all modern art in Germany, in part because he thought a lot of it was Jewish art, but also in part because he just didn't personally like that art. And as a failed artist, he, I think, was very touchy about people succeeding in ways that he could never even have approached. But what I learned by going through the museum is that there was a more broadly popular reaction to modernism, particularly at the speed with which it was occurring in Germany. And so therefore, the banning of modern art and Führer's sort of back to traditional German values campaign was probably much more broadly popular than I had given it credit. Anyway, the special exhibition that won't be there for long, but I believe is going to be at the Munich, at the museum for at least the rest of the year, was a compelling history of the Warsaw Ghetto told by its inhabitants. The Warsaw Ghetto Jews, when they were forced to live in that ghetto and basically, under siege by the Nazi army, they embarked on an effort to record their history. And even though the ghetto was destroyed, these documents were preserved. And they are available for this year as a special exhibit in the museum. And I just have to say that was also extremely compelling their satirical magazine they put out about life in the occupation, the simple letters of individuals, the writings of school children, all of that has been preserved, or much of it, and makes, again, for a very compelling exhibition. Too often we think about these big events in history and we analyze them in this super critical and intellectual way. I think it's always really important to appreciate that each of these events have profound implications on thousands of distinct human beings, and that is their stories that we really need to remember, much more so than the political theory that events in Germany support or don't support. So if you're in Munich, visit the Munich Documentation Museum, and hopefully you'll get a chance to come, some of you, while the Warsaw Ghetto exhibit is still there. Thanks for listening. If you found this interesting, and maybe I'll start posting more short commentaries on my visits or my travels. And if you want to know when I'm posting stuff like this, you can subscribe, and I think that allows you to get a notification. It doesn't cost you anything. I don't think it takes away any great personal privacy either. But if you don't want to do it, I'm good with that as well. Thanks for listening.